Cool.
All right.
Okay.
How's everyone
So
doing
now it
this
doesn't-
morning? Good. Awesome. TJ is headed skiing because it is a powder day. So I will be holding down the question fort today. Could be good. Could be interesting. Last time I remember being so out of breath, I thought I was going to pass out. Talking for 40 minutes is harder than running, for sure. Made me feel like really made me question everything I believed about my aerobic base and how strong it is. How's it going? Hi, Mike. Good to see you.
Pretty good here.
Nice. Yeah. Are you guys getting snow yet? I mean, I know in the mountains, but.
Well, we're down in the valley. We get occasional snow. It's basically just rain every day.
Yeah. Even
but
better.
yeah, we can.
Nice cold rain.
But yeah, we're getting some good mountain snow.
Nice. That's what matters. I say that as someone who doesn't ever have to run in cold rain.
Mike, where do you live?
Salem, Oregon.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, when we get snow, everything shuts down. We don't handle snow well here in the valley.
Mike, I used to live in Portland and I remember the year of the snowpocalypse.
Yep.
Everything shut down because Portland metro area has like 2 snowplows or something insane. And like the alerts on everyone's phone were like, don't go outside, don't look outside, don't think about looking outside, just don't do it.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Well, I
Every
remember
time that
trying to get.
happens- Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I remember trying to get to the airport to go ice climbing in Ouray during that. And we were like slip sliding all over the 205 trying to get to the airport.
Oh,
Wow.
that sounds awful. I do remember a few specific track meets in Salem. I went to the University of Oregon and I remember some of the track and cross country meets, cross country more specifically, but like just so much mud. And like there's a photo of like the team, we're literally covered from like the backs of our heads to like the bottoms of our spikes. It's just like constant rain, you know? And like, in fact, that same race, my teammate Lisa, her shoe got sucked off in the mud and she had to keep running the race. But she lost the shoe.
That snowpocalypse is the origin of the like perfect texture for running meme, right?
Yeah, so crazy story is that girl, Chelsea, she's actually a friend of mine. We worked together in the Nike running department out at the Nike headquarters. And she is so amazing and just like the nicest human on the planet. And I don't know what was going on that night. It just like that interview made her seem so pretentious.
What are you doing running?
And ever since then, I just like, anytime someone's like, oh, it's the perfect texture, I feel like I have to defend her because just like portrayed her in the wrong way. But she's
I think
amazing.
the reason that meme is like particularly resonant for me is that I am very much Chelsea. Like I am that person that's like, this weather is perfect. I couldn't ask for better weather. And then I go and like get a debilitating season ending injury.
Yeah, it's super relatable for sure. I remember watching it on repeat at like a friend's house for breakfast the next morning, where we would all get together and like watch kung fu movies and make waffles or whatever. But like this particular day, we just watched Chelsea like on repeat, just fall and like run away and fall and run away and fall. And I just remember going into work the next day being like, I'm so sorry, I'm a terrible friend. Like I just watched you fall hundreds of times. But fortunately she was okay.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've got a whole list of questions today. And when I say a whole list, I mean upwards of six at the max. So we'll just see what we get through. But yeah, you guys, thank you so much for submitting these questions. I think that there's some pretty good ones here. The first one, getting right down into it now that we're 8 minutes in. My question today is, when out running trails, when is it a good time for walking? I've heard from my other trail runner friends that you run the rhythm of the trail. In other words, you run at a consistent effort, even if it means power hiking hill sections. What are your thoughts on this? if I had a friend tell me to run the rhythm of the trail, they would almost 100% get punched in the face, because that is some pretentious ass trail runner bullshit. I've never felt particularly like, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh yeah, I'm in the flow and really communing with the nature gods out here on the trail. Something that resonates much more with me is just like run at a consistent effort. That's going to mean you hike some hills. I just wouldn't put expectations on yourself either way when it comes to like, definitely not when it comes to pace. Definitely like, don't get into these mental traps where you feel like, oh, I should be running this, because that's a really great way to like accelerate out of the best effort level, and then like, end up redlining and then having to walk very runnable sections of trail. So it's totally just about like what feels good and easy. And this is one reason that we don't want people like only ever training on very steep or very technical trails, is because the more you're forced to slow down and like the more you're walking, like here's the thing, we all get a lot of practice walking. Like I walk every day. I have to go to the fridge, I have to go to the bathroom. It's a lot of walking. You're walking at this point probably pretty dialed as an athlete, not a lot of room for improvement on the walking and power hiking fronts. There's some notable exceptions, like if you're training for UTMB, huge 100-mile long mountain races, like yeah, sure, we're gonna like get feisty with a little more hill specific training. But for the majority of us, like on this team, on this call, on planet Earth, you really don't need to like stress too much about like how good your walking is. It's probably amazing. Haven't seen it, I would bet that it's great. So we really just want to focus, and like I know we harp on a lot about running economy, but a great way to develop running economy is to choose runnable trails that facilitate running. You get good at what you practice, and if you're practicing walking, you're going to get good at walking. We want to get good at running. But I think just when you're out running on trails, just keep it easy. Don't get too in your head about what easy should or shouldn't be. Just run easy. If that means you're going to hit a hill, awesome. Sorry, I have a weird.
I would also say that like a lot of times during, I don't know, like running up steep stuff, there are times where I'm like, oh man, like I can run this and that's great. So like run what you can, but just power hike the rest, and don't put pressure on yourself to go set like a KOM or anything, because that's insane. Like power hiking is fine. You're going to do it.
Power hiking is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a balance. Like don't redline all your trail runs. Don't only hike all your trail runs either. It's about finding that balance and what works for you. And also just being cognizant about route selection, that you're picking trails that facilitate what your goals are. And it's also totally valid if your goals are like being healthy and happy and enjoying a trail run, right? Like we're not all training for UTMB. It's totally cool to just go have fun on a trail run. Yeah, I love power hiking hill sections. I power hike the heck out of hills. I had another point on this, but I forgot what it was. And this is where it comes in so handy to just have anyone else taking up space with their words. But question 2, and if you guys have questions as we go, as always, feel free to drop them in the chat box, and I'll do my best to address everything that comes my way. What are tips for positive self-talk? I love this question because just like everything else with running, it can totally be developed through practice. Like, I think a lot of times we let ourselves off the hook for things, particularly with like mental things, because we assume like, oh, that's just how my thought processes are. They can't be changed. But the cool thing is like a lot of our thought patterns are just as trainable as like muscular patterns, right? Like in the same way that you practice, firing your glutes, you have to practice firing your positive self-talk at the right time during your run. And so I think the first step is understanding that like you are in control of your positive self-talk. This is something that can and should be practiced just like every other part of running. And it's a habit, right? So like what you do in practice will happen like on race day, on long runs, and like throughout the rest of your life, right? Like if you're the kind of person who gets down on yourself during runs, it's likely you're also the kind of person who like gets down on yourself while you're baking brownies or giving a presentation at work or like doing all these other wonderful human things that we do that like you probably just would rather be your own cheerleader for. So my first tip on developing positive self-talk is to recognize that it is a practice and then put it into practice. So start noticing during your long runs and workouts and like when in life generally, you start to engage in negative self-talk. Imagine that every thought went through your head was played over a loudspeaker. How would you feel about other people hearing the way that you talk to yourself, right? Like I know for sure there's been times where I would feel a lot of genuine shame or sadness if people heard the way I talk to myself. And that can sometimes be a powerful trigger to adjust how I'm speaking to myself in a way that people would be like, okay, yeah, that's how a person should talk to themselves. And just like externalizing those thoughts, right? Like recognizing them and then kind of putting them out in the open. Like, you know, if I notice that I'm engaging in a workout and I start to go slow, there's going to be, my brain's going to maybe for even a split second say like, you're no good, you're not good at running. The more I can recognize that and say, hey, like I'm in control of this thought process. Let's flip it and reverse it and be like, you're slowing down because this workout is hard, but you're a boss and you're going to stay in it. Oh my gosh, I love this. Alexander Hamilton at High Volume is the best positive self-talk. Like anytime you can say to yourself, I'm not throwing away my shot, there is no more powerful mantra. Prove me wrong. You can't. It is amazing. Hamilton will like fix almost every positive self-talk issue you have. Other go-tos for me are Lizzo and Beyonce. If I am not able to like in myself write the most powerful mantra in the moment, just switching to music that's like powerful and uplifting and about self-confidence is like, in my case, 90% effective. Milkshake by Kellis is also amazing. Wow, this is good stuff. And like, it can be fun and it can be silly, right? Like, I think, you know, and I've talked about this before, but like in order for things to feel really honest and authentic, like for me, at least, they need to feel true to who I am, which is like a silly Beyonce loving person. So if you're, you know, like an American history Hamilton loving person, then like your positive self-talk will likely embody that part of your identity as well in a way that feels authentic and efficient for your life. And I think that that is really cool and important, that like it can kind of, you know, what positive self-talk looks like for me will look different for other people. I think an important thing to recognize is that there is literally zero evidence that I have ever seen in coaching, in my own life, and also like in reading journal articles about this. There is no evidence that being hard on yourself and being mean to yourself makes you better. I think that at a core level, we've always been told to like not let ourselves off the hook, not cut ourselves slack, like be mean to yourself, like be, you know, like, you know, the more you get down on yourself, the more you can motivate yourself to do better. Like David Goggins, yeah, I'm a piece of, you know, I'm just gonna like, you know, that doesn't work. Like there's literally no scientific evidence that that makes you better at whatever you're doing. And I think that it kind of falls prey to like our baser instincts, which are, you know, kind of this lie that culture tells us that we're like not enough, we're not good enough, we have to prove ourselves. None of that is true. And it also will not make you better at stuff. Like if you're only ever doing stuff and improving to prove yourself, that's going to fall really flat when you need it most. The better you're able to recognize that you're in control of how you feel about yourself, and then you can weaponize it for positive, like weaponize that positively, the better off you're going to be. Yeah, I would not recommend. I am not a huge, all humans are wonderful, we are all made of star stuff. I'm not really sure what part of the star David Goggins came from, but like, damn, no thank you. Just like this, the media that you consume is really important. Like I'm a lot more Brene Brown than I am David Goggins, which explains everything about my personality. The stuff that you consume about who you are is really important. Like you are writing the story about who you are and how you feel about yourself. I would be very careful about consuming a diet that tells you that you have to prove yourself, that you're lazy, that you're not good enough. Like consume things that help you understand how amazing you are and that like you're in control of that, and that can help you build a more robust positive self-talk practice as well. You know, just start noticing the things that trigger negative emotions and then like pay attention to those so that you can get ahead, right? Like if you're going to go into a workout and you know, like in the past, slowing down or like bungling an interval has caused me to engage in negative self-talk, then be ready for that moment. And when it comes, like head those negative feelings off and encounter them with positive, like with your own positive feelings, like with like, you know, if you weren't good at running, you wouldn't be out here, but you're out here, you're running, you are good. You are enough unconditionally. Oh man, love Brene Brown. This is from Lindsay. Another thing I tried to do when I start getting hard on myself is think, would I ever say this to anyone else? And if someone said this to me, would I still be their friend? I love that point. I actually had that written down because that's super important. How would you talk to a friend, right? How would you talk to a loved one? That is how you should talk to yourself. I'm a huge believer, and it's a thing I've adopted from Brene Brown, that until you learn to really try and consistently engage in the project of loving yourself, you're going to struggle to apply those same principles to other people. If you continually judge yourself, there is always going to be a part of you that judges other people. So the more that you can start to disentangle those things and like how you treat yourself, how you talk to yourself, the more capable you're going to be of loving other people. And so just like a heuristic that I think is really important is like, the way that you should talk to yourself is the way that you should talk to someone you love. Like, even if you're not to that place of unconditional self-acceptance yet, like I get that, it's a journey. We're all out here trying to figure it out together. 2020 hasn't been like particularly amazing in terms of like inward self-affection for I think a lot of people, but like when I'm having a hard day, I talk to myself in the way I would talk to Kristen and in the way I know she would talk to me. And that freaking helps, you know? I would never tell someone that I loved that they weren't good enough or that they were slow or that like they weren't an athlete. Like, think about how you would talk to people that you know and love and lift up, and talk to yourself that way. And, you know, I think one of the things that's important about positive self-talk is it is kind of like a fake it until it feels real kind of scenario, but that doesn't make it dishonest or inauthentic, right? Like, this is just like one more way that we can get to kind of become closer to ourselves and engage with ourselves in a more positive way. And it's going to feel weird at first, but it just takes practice, right? Like in the same way that strides feel totally awkward and unnatural at first, like, to be honest, I, you know, was always really hard on myself and trying to accept myself as I was and talk to myself in a way that was positive and uplifting felt very unnatural at first, because like, I think that I kind of started more on the David Goggins, like no excuses, be a hard ass side of things. And I've been migrating towards the Brene Brown, it's important I love myself because that enables me to love other people side of things. I would be, not as good a coach for other people if I couldn't start to coach myself in a way that was true to who I am and true to who I wanted to be and was accepting of where I am and just resonated self-love. Because like you can't adequately love other people until you start to do that work yourself. And this became a very weird spin-off of positive self-talk, but it's really, really important. So think about how those thoughts would sound out loud. Think about what you would say to someone you love. Start to talk to yourself that way. Recognize that it is practice. It will take work. It will feel weird, but it will over time improve. Third question. I've been trying to do all of my runs outdoors. It's good for my mental health, and 2, feel like it's better preparation for racing. I've been avoiding it like the plague, but when is it okay or even beneficial to hit the treadmill? The good news is that I think it's like very beneficial to hit the treadmill whenever it works for you. Trevor Fuchs won the Hurt 100 training only on the treadmill. Like, it's possible. You can do really amazing. In fact, I would actually say, so I'm not going to give general guidelines. I'm going to give ways on how you can think about these things to make decisions in a way that makes sense and feel good for your own life. So the top priorities are physical and mental health. Your training should feel good most of the time. If training starts to, like, if either running in the snow, running in crappy weather, or hitting the treadmill starts to feel like a mental weight and you're just like, oh my God, I can't even imagine being on the treadmill for one more mile, or like, I can't even imagine being outside for one more second. It is so freaking cold. That's when it's time to change tactics. So start to notice when you start to feel a sense of dread or like sadness or heaviness in your training. And then that can be a really good way to recognize that it might be time to change strategies. So like if there's any risk, like with the weather, like if it's extremely cold, it's snowy, icy, and like genuinely health and safety is at risk, don't push it, right? Like no one run matters. Literally nothing you can do today actually matters, which is super freeing because that just allows you to not like beat yourself up over missing a run in like a foot of snow. Cause like, honestly, that run would not have like been that beneficial for you anyway, you know? Do what is going to help. And this is something we talked about on our last call, but whatever you do on any given day, make sure that that one day, the most important thing it can do, and basically the only thing it can do, is set you up for better training down the road. So if hopping on the treadmill is going to help you train happier and healthier 5 years from now, do that. If training outside in the snow is going to make you feel like a mental toughness queen and allow you to train 5-10 years from now, do that. Do whatever is going to help you stay healthy, happy, and engaged in the process. Some kind of general caveat to that are, once again, with a focus on running economy, snow slogging, not super beneficial for running economy. And I would advise against snow slogging all the time, just because it'll wear you out and it will not make you super great at running. Snow slogging being like when your like kind of your effort doesn't match your output for like days and days and days in a row, right? Like when you're just like trudging through excessive amounts of snow and it's kind of, you're not even really running anymore. That's when it's a great time to hit the treadmill. If you have a treadmill available, I know a lot of us don't because it's COVID and, we do not have a treadmill at our house. We do not, there's like 2 treadmills in our whole town. Not really an option for us. So just like let yourself off the hook if that's the case. Like if weather's really crappy and you don't have access to a treadmill, don't worry about it. Hop on the trainer or just like do 10 push-ups and call it a day, right? Like whatever you do today needs to set you up to be happy and healthy 5 years from now. And that's the most important thing. I think, the other, like this questioner says that running outside helps her feel more prepared for races. I do think that can be true to an extent, right? Like if you hop on the treadmill every time there's even like a frost or like any amount of moisture in the air, then like you're not going to be prepared when you go to a race and conditions are suboptimal. So there is something to be said for like every so often, like kind of pushing yourself without, once again, ever crossing that line between like, this is bad for my mental or physical health. But every so often, I think you can get like a mental boost from being like, yay, look, like I'm out, like I know I did my long run in the snow last week. It was a powder day. Everyone else in town was out skiing. And I was like, heck yeah, I am out here training for like, who knows what, running through the snow, feeling tough, having fun on a powder day. And like, man, I would not want to race a girl who's doing that, right? Like there's a way in which it can kind of give us confidence when we engage with challenging circumstances, once again, without jeopardizing physical and mental health. So just kind of think about what you're trying to get from the run, right? Like we want to balance running economy. We want to balance mental health. We want to balance happiness. We want to balance whatever is going to prevent us from burning out. And then we want to find confidence, right? Like if running on the treadmill makes you feel like I am mentally unshakable, I can stare at a screen for like 2 hours and like, you will not beat me. Awesome, right? But like you're in control of whatever you get out of that run. So if running outside brings that, like helps you bring that to the table, awesome, do that. If running on the treadmill helps you bring that to the table, awesome, great. You're in control. But once again, health, safety, always the priority. Running economy is also important. So like no excessive snow slogging every so often. If like post-holing just brings you so much life and you love it and it makes you feel like a total boss, like great, do that on Saturday or Sunday. We don't need to do it every single day of the week. Yeah, I think that's kind of all I have to say about treadmill running. Do it when it feels good. Don't do it if it doesn't feel good. Rest when that feels good. Don't run too hard. Just do whatever is going to allow you to keep training for the longest. That is the most important thing. That's like always the heuristic you should approach every single day with, is like, how does what I do today enable me to be a better athlete 5 years from now? Because nothing you do today matters. How can flatlanders prepare for a race at altitude? So this is a question we get a lot because we train athletes all over the world, and a lot of our athletes who are very trail curious are really excited to do bigger mountain races, which like I totally get. I moved to the mountains because I love it here. But there are some downsides to coming up from sea level to altitude. It's tough. So usually the advice I give athletes who are coming from sea level to race at altitude, I would define altitude as like really anything above 5,000 feet, but it's all relative, right? Like I've had, like there are some people to whom Moab would feel like altitude. And so I think, another thing to touch on is I think that there's sometimes people will judge themselves harshly for suffering at altitude. And how well you perform at altitude is a very complicated thing. It is partially determined by genetics, partially determined by fitness, partially determined by like how much water you've been drinking. Like there's a lot going into it. So just like don't get down on yourself if you're not someone who just rocks being at altitude all the time. That's totally fair. Like, and even for athlete, like I generally tend to do well at altitude, but I've also had days where I'm like, oh my God, I might die up here and it's only 8,000 feet, you know? So just be kind to yourself on those days, recognize like that it does take a little bit of time to adjust. Typically when we have athletes coming from sea level to go race or train at altitude, we recommend getting as many sleeps as possible in at altitude. So like if you're gonna go run Leadville, I would try to get out there as early as you can and get as many nights of sleep at 10,000 feet as you possibly can, because that's kind of the best way to adjust and acclimate. Understand that you're also just going, yes, I love this question, and we are going to get to that. Go slower. You're just going to have to go slower. Like your output is not, your effort level and output are going to be mismatched compared to where you are. And if you go out too hard in a race at altitude, there is basically no coming back. Like you have screwed yourself. So just ease into it. Go extra slow on purpose. From Kristen, is there some truth to the belief that heat training gets you somewhat ready for altitude? The answer is kind of yes. So heat training, so doing something like, you know, training in hot conditions, wearing a bunch of outerwear to run in, sauna protocols, hot tub protocols. There is some evidence that a heat training or sauna protocol can help increase blood plasma volume. Increased blood plasma volume is associated with some similar adaptations to living at altitude. So if you want to give yourself every best opportunity to do well at altitude, you know, short of like renting out a hyperbaric chamber, you can also engage in some heat training, which has been shown in some circumstances to help. There's a lot of conditions there. It's something that there's still some amount of debate and research around. So, but yes, heat training does have some similar adaptations. But for me, just the best advice is to like, be easy on yourself, go slower than you think you might have to, drink more water than you think you might have to. I used to be a backpacking guide in New Mexico, and I would always get like, I was always assigned like the crews from like Dallas, Texas, who would like immediately like come from sea level, fly out to New Mexico and be like, let's go to 12,000 feet. And then they would get pretty sick. So a thing that I became a huge fan of when I was a backpacking guide was a very gross sports drink called Acclimate. It tastes like Robitussin from hell, but I think it's pretty effective. It has some weird mix of minerals in it, and I can't remember why it's helpful, but if you're someone that struggles, that's something that I've seen be helpful with people before. Also for people that struggle with nausea at altitude, ginger can be like ginger chews, ginger candy, or like crystallized ginger can be helpful for that too. I'm curious, do we have any flatlanders on the team who have raced at altitude and have any tips that they wanted to share or things that they thought worked particularly well for them? I feel like I always end up going from altitude to like Arkansas and then just being like, oh my God, the humidity is like way worse than any altitude I've ever encountered. Or like, oh my God, the mosquitoes are going to kill me before the humidity does. Kristen, what's the elevation in Sedona?
Just under 5,000.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so it's not bad. Just
Yeah.
a little lower than Boulder.
Yeah, I think, I mean, but you and I at some point have had the similar experience of moving from sea level to Boulder specifically. I remember it took me like, I think it took me 2 weeks to adjust coming from Arkansas to Boulder. And then when I moved from Boulder to Aspen, I had to change my training for basically a month.
Yeah, when I moved from Portland to Boulder, it took me, I'm really bad at acclimating. It took me 8 months to a year to actually feel better. I remember I would wake up in the middle of the night having like panic attacks because I couldn't.
Yeah,
but I
like sleep
there
apnea.
wasn't enough oxygen.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, it's another one of the other bigger kind of risk factors of living and or training and or being at altitude is that your recovery is going to be really, really reduced because your sleep is going to be impacted and you're just getting less oxygen. So one of the biggest things, and this is like specifically a concern we've seen with athletes, particularly female athletes at altitude, is like iron anemia. That's been a huge problem. I know that like for me, when I moved to Aspen, that was like, it triggered what had been a chronic issue into a more severe acute issue. So that's something to look out for if this is like a longer term adjusting to altitude situation. But yeah, just know that it's gonna affect your performance and your recovery. So that's always fun. But like, I think, you know, the key takeaways there are like heat train if that's accessible to you, be kind to yourself because that's accessible to everyone. Go slow. and, you know, pick races. Like if you are living and training in Dallas and you desperately want to run Leadville, just like block the time off to like get out there. Like I would not recommend showing up the day before the race and expecting to do your best. Because altitude's real and everyone responds differently. So it's kind of a wild card. So like if you're someone who wants to like do big races at altitude, like a 100-mile race, like I would definitely flirt with some shorter distance races at an analog altitude so that you can kind of figure out what works for you. I would not let your first ever experience at altitude be like the race that you're most passionate about on earth and you've never been to altitude before and you're going to try to gun it for 50 or 100 miles, but you've like never practiced eating at altitude, because that's a big issue we see is people struggling to eat at altitude. And the best way to be good at running at altitude is eating at altitude.
I would
Unless
also
you're doing a
say,
10K at altitude, which in that case, God have mercy on your soul.
yeah, I would also say it's worth if you're moving to altitude, or if, you know, like Zoe was talking about, if you're going to do Leadville and you're trying to get as many nights of sleep at 10,000 feet as possible, it's definitely worth getting a blood panel done just to see like nutrient wise, you know, like what you're missing, what is either deficient or you have too much of or something. And then, you know, book an appointment with Kylie and figure out how to manage everything.
Yeah, because living and training at altitude is a risk factor for anemia, as I've been led to understand. But
yeah. And
yeah.
when I moved to Boulder from Portland, I was I had a blood panel done and I was deficient in vitamin D and B12 and like all of these things that were just exacerbated by the altitude. So when, you know, I like sat down and worked with a nutritionist, and I didn't know Kylie at the time, but she would have been the one I would have called up. You know, it's just things got better after that. And I knew something was off. Everything felt wrong. So it's worth it to just kind of know what your numbers are and then, you know, work with a professional and figure out how to manage things.
Yeah. Just to backtrack a tiny bit in the chat, shout out to Derek Green, who gets his positive self-talk from Gucci Mane. I would be lying if I didn't say that. I can't remember what the name of the song is, and I'm not going to try to remember it because I think it might have an expletive in the title, but the song where he appreciates women with big butts is on my running playlist, and I really love it. And it makes me feel very strong and powerful on climbs. I hope it does for you too, Derek.
Yeah, I just want to shout out to another good one is Megan Thee Stallion.
Yeah.
Extremely
Hot Girl Summer
motivated.
always gets me. Actually, anything she writes.
Yeah, for sure.
She's like the poet laureate of my hard training blocks.
Totally.
She's the
She just
queen of
amps me
positive
up.
self-talk. Actually, yeah, I feel like one of the things that I love most about rap music is that it, like, at its essence, when you strip all the offensive language out of it, it's about women succeeding in their chosen careers, typically lifting one another up and appreciating their bodies, which is like things we can all get on board with, in more or less words. Awesome. I like rap music. Next question. Zoe recently said, "Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress." I'm curious how we conceive of progress. What are we looking for to perceive that progress is happening? I'm guessing some of those are numbers, for example, change and easy pace that you mentioned, but I'm also interested in how we might see progress in non-numerical ways. I really love this question because actually the primary things that I'm looking for in terms of progress in athletes are non-numerical. Like we don't just like, it's not like a double standard thing where we tell people to not pay attention to the numbers and then like, gotcha, your coaches are actually like obsessing about what your pace is. The biggest thing, like the first thing I look for in athletes in terms of progress, like, and this is more applicable to newer athletes, like I would say anyone who's been training consistently for less than a year would qualify as new, is improved recovery. And so what that looks like in practice is feeling better on like consecutive running days. So for a lot of athletes, that's going to be Thursdays and Sundays. So like, are you recovering well after your long run? And like Sundays are starting to feel like a little bit less of a grind. That's an amazing indication of progress because it means that your recovery is improving and your fitness is improving. Something I like to say to my athletes is that your pace can lie, your effort can lie, but your recovery can't lie. Like you can't like you know, I think we've all had the experience of maybe seeing some numbers on like the watch that we were like, oh, I feel pretty good about. Like, you know, maybe there's like other factors at work that are affecting what your pace looks like, but you can't fake recovery, right? Like you're recovered well or you're not recovered as well. So one of the biggest things that we look for is improved recovery. And another thing that we'll see in that is a bigger gap between your top end speed and your easy pace, particularly during workouts. So like, are you able to accelerate and then get back to your baseline and feel better at your baseline? Because like, I think a lot of us are able to accelerate pretty dang fast, and that may not be as directly correlated with how fit you are, but your ability to recover between accelerations, that doesn't lie, right? Like you're recovered or you're not recovered. Feeling better on Thursdays, right? Particularly after 3 consecutive days of running, particularly after a big workout. So like feeling better after big Wednesday workouts and having Thursdays just feel a little bit less like a slog from hell, that's an amazing sign that you're improving as an athlete. Like to me as a coach, that is significantly more important than what your pace is, how far you're going, whatever it is. Like improved recovery is kind of the first huge thing we're looking for. And there is like no number associated with that. Like I don't care what your Whoop says, Whoop can lie. There's no algorithm that is as good as my athlete saying like, I felt good today. Like literally nothing your Whoop or like Strava, like no robot can tell me anything more important than when an athlete says like Sunday felt pretty good, you know? And I will also say that like it's very normal in training for those days to feel kind of grindy, particularly when you're newer to consistent training. Like I know when I first started training 5 days a week, Thursdays were like, I always felt like I was barely surviving. So just know that like that's an okay place to be. And the more that you sit with that and kind of stick that out, the faster you'll get to the place where like Thursdays kind of just become another day or Sundays just become another day. And you know, one of the biggest things that we see, like as your fitness improves, your recovery improves. Another thing that we look for, which isn't explicitly numbers related, is a bigger gap between just generally, not just in workouts, between top end speed and easy pace. We have some incredibly fit athletes on this team that rock easy days at like 12, 11 minute pace, right? Like these are people that could like definitely run a sub 5 minute mile, but they know that in order to progress, they need to run really intentionally slow. And they have a huge gap between what their top end speed is and what their chill speed is. And the fitter you get and the better your running economy is, the easier it is for you to run easy. So easy could be a variety of paces. I don't like putting numbers on things because I think that anytime, like I know whenever I hear a number, my brain immediately is like, compare yourself to that. Let's not play that game, brains, please. It's not useful for anyone. So like whatever your easy pace is, whatever your top end pace is, the bigger that gap gets, the better. And I think that like, you know, something that we see a lot is that people who are newer to running, especially just like running easy is hard. And it's also hard for people who aren't as new, but have maybe been habitually training a little harder than is beneficial for aerobic development and just like training generally. So give yourself tons of time for that gap to grow. But what we're looking for is people who can just like rock like crazy chill and then go real fast, and whatever happens in between, like I don't really care. What we're looking for is that gap, and the more efficient you get, and this is like one of those really counterintuitive things, but like you'll get really good at running slow. Join Microcosm, we'll make you incredible at slowing down. Tell your friends. And so I think it's really important to just make sure that you are always running as chill as possible on easy days. You can't run too chill as long as you are still technically running. So that's something that I really look for in athletes. And it's also, you know, another kind of non-numerical sign of progress to look for is less bad days, not just like Sundays and Thursdays, but just an increasing number of days in the log where athletes are like, this was surprisingly good, or like, wow, I thought I was running so slow, but my pace was actually like pretty cool. That's awesome. Like what we're looking for is increased focus on effort, decreased focus on pace, and that pace will follow, right? Like the more you become uninterested in pace, the more likely that is to improve. I think that a lot of people get really caught up in the numbers and just like to iterate stuff we've talked about in other calls before without sounding too much like a broken record, is that like the more you like, numbers don't tell the whole story, right? Like if you tried to Like if you do the same workout at the beginning and at the end of a training block, if it's the same, or even if you're faster at the end, that's not always the goal of the training block, right? Like sometimes we're accumulating fatigue that will make you feel like you'll be a little bit more fatigued at the end of a training block. And that's why we taper for races, is because we need to process that fatigue before we go and try to perform at our best. But you are not going to be in peak shape and the fastest you've ever been every single day. Progress is not linear, right? You know, we always talk about building a brick wall. I think especially during winter training, especially for athletes who don't have an event very close on the schedule or who haven't done an event recently, you're not so much a brick wall as you are an amazing pile of bricks, of like fitness bricks that we're going to assemble into a more specific wall later. So the goal of training is to not always be at peak fitness. It is not to always be your fastest. If you feel like you could go out and PR your 5K every single day, then you may not be engaging in training in the best way possible. It's gonna ebb and flow, right? Like there are gonna be some weeks that feel amazing, maybe at the beginning of a training block or coming after a down week. And there's gonna be some days where you might be like, whoa, I'm a little fatigued. The general rules are that we want to feel generally good. The best training happens when we feel good. So if you start to feel like excessive fatigue that inhibits the quality of your workout for more than 2 days, that's when we need to like intentionally reduce. But just know that like, if you do 8 by 2 minutes fast at the beginning of a block and 8 by 2 minutes fast at the end of that block, or even a block later, just because your times aren't always getting faster, that does not mean you are not getting better. What it means is that we're looking for specific training stimulus, and that training stimulus isn't always going to be like faster 2-minute intervals, because I don't know of a single person on this team whose event is a 2-minute interval. So that's not what we're specifically training for. And it's okay to get mixed messages from your workouts, because training kind of like undulates and your fitness is going to undulate as well. I like to think of it as a scatter point. Like each day is just like a, bump, 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 like a dot. We want that line to be generally trending upwards, but it's not going to go up every single day. There's going to be some dots that just look like I ran a route the other day and like it was literally the slowest I had ever run it, like even slower than before I started training. And I was like, awesome, this is great, because I know I'm keeping my effort honest, and I know I'm engaging in the process of training at a slightly higher volume than I was back then. So you can't always predict like what the outcome of a certain day of training is going to be. What's important is that you are trending upwards, and you let the days that like kind of lie to you and say like you're getting slower, ignore those. Definitely ignore when your watch says you're detraining, because your watch doesn't know shit. Your watch is a robot that has no idea what you're eating, sleeping, and doing in training. That is why you hired a coach. If there was a watch that was smarter than me, you would all know about it and you would have it, because it would be cheaper in the long run, but that doesn't exist. And that is why I have this job. So whenever your watch makes you feel bad about yourself, remind it that you are the human and you are in control, right? Like we do not take cues from our technology about what our value as humans is. That is why we have family and friends and coaches and teammates. Likely you're not detraining. Watches don't understand that you run slow on purpose to build your aerobic base. Your watch thinks like every day getting faster. Like your watch is like a little wrist David Goggins, and you just got to turn that off when it gets feisty like that. My watch tells me I'm detraining. Like I remember the day before I ran my FKT, I did like a 30-minute shakeout, and my watch was like, "You're detraining. Consider resting for 72 hours." And I was like, "Not a chance, tiny wrist robot. We're going big tomorrow." Your watch is dumb. Like you could honestly train pretty well with like just like a stopwatch, like knowing what time you were running for. Algorithms are really stupid. So another thing that I thought would be fun to talk about I really don't love David Goggins. I think he's mean, and I don't think that's cool. I don't like a culture that celebrates people being mean. That's the easy way, right? Like if like whatever your base instincts are, if you just appeal to those, that doesn't make you like smart or cool or like a fun contrarian because you think Americans are like lazy and the only thing keeping us from achieving our potential is we don't work hard. Like, no, the thing that's generally keeping people from achieving their potential is they don't love themselves and they're struggling to accept themselves. Like it's so easy to not like yourself. What David Goggins does is crazy easy. We could all sit here and not like ourselves. What the real work is loving yourself. Like that is way harder. Show me a person that truly and authentically loves themselves, and that person is a hero. I want to do the hard thing, right? Like, I think we're all here to do the hard thing. Running's the hard thing, right? Like, it's super hard to get out there and train every day. It's super hard to get out there and accept yourself day in and day out. That is way harder. Like, there is no amount of push-ups that David Goggins could do at the finish line of a 200 that would make me think he is tougher or like smarter or like a bigger badass than someone that just says, I accept and love myself as I am. Like, where's my audiobook deal? You know, like, why do we keep giving this guy so much money and like podcasts? Just my thoughts. Yeah, don't, if you break a bone during a race, permission granted to not finish that race. Long-term health is huge. Mental health is huge. The way that you like actually succeed in this sport is by like accumulating a ton of data. Like, you just stay in the game longer, right? And so like, if you get it, David Goggins famously finished, I think, Leadville with a stress fracture, and then everyone in the world is like, oh my God, that's so awesome. It's not that awesome. That's like really not that great. Don't do that, please. Permission granted to never do that and to feel very good when you DNF after breaking a bone, because there are larger issues at work. And I'm going to direct you to our dietitian, Kylie, because I suspect you might have a vitamin D deficiency at minimum, but also could consider therapy. It's a whole thing. It's a tapestry. I would love to talk to David Goggins. My editor at work keeps pressuring me to have him on DNF, and I've just not reached out because I truly don't care. Can we rename our watches on Strava the same way we rename our shoes? You definitely should. I would name mine Brene. Yeah. Tiny wrist David Goggins. Anyway, that's a fun soapbox. I'll rant about him anytime I get. It's very hard working in an industry that just like worships people who are like making money off of being mean. I don't know, not my jam. Tips for travel. I know a lot of people are trapped. Weird segue. Speaking of David Goggins, go see your family if it's safe and accessible and allowed by local guidelines and regulations. TJ is going to be so glad he wasn't here for this. So sorry, TJ, if you're watching, which you won't. Tips for travel. So some things that we look for in like ways to think about training that we've like already talked over in this podcast. To be YouTube video. Consistency is big, but what consistency means can vary, right? Does that mean that you have to like absolutely stick your training plan to the T every single day for the rest of your life and like, you know, screw your family eating Christmas dinner, you're going to go get your workout in? Absolutely not. You should do what makes sense for you to stay in the game longer. Like, that is always the priority. Stay in the game longer, stay in the game. That's what training is, right? Nothing you can do this year matters if you don't also train for like 8 more years. Prioritize consistency while traveling, and that could mean reducing miles and reducing intensity just so that you like feel good about getting your shoes on and getting out the door. Maybe it means like not running on Christmas and taking a mental break, whatever that means for you, so that you can continue to train happy and healthfully well beyond the holidays. What I don't think it means is totally taking the holidays like off and not thinking about running at all, because like, oh my God, there's anything on the schedule, I can only run when it's perfect, I have no power to make it happen. I think that that's not a super great mindset. I think you should feel empowered to talk to your family, friends, whoever you're spending the holidays with, partner, kids, dogs, like whatever it is, about what your training goals and needs are and like how you can all work together to make that happen. You know, just like get in as much running as you can and whatever, I mean, not like don't go wall to wall running. Train according to the plan that you've been given by the coach you're paying. And yeah, if you start to feel like dread around your runs, or like, oh my God, I'm really not looking forward to this, I've got to get so much done today, I've got to get my vegan turkey in the oven, and then I've got to do this workout, like, oh my God, it's too much, just run easier, right? Like 45 minutes easy beats not running every time. And so if you start to feel like mentally overwhelmed by the idea of training on top of all the other very mentally overwhelming things associated with the holidays, that could be a sign that you're going too hard. Or it could just mean like, you know, instead of trying to do like tempoing 8 miles, just chill out, do 40 minutes easy. That's awesome. That's, you know, that's better than missing a day, or sometimes missing a day is better than forcing a run and then like totally burning yourself out or injuring yourself. I think, you know, another thing, like I am someone that does like not like, I run the same route like almost every single day. I do not like live for exploring new routes and unknown places. I like whenever we go visit TJ's family in Denver. I don't necessarily love running around Denver. I think as a small town girl, I get like very freaked out whenever I see more than like 2 cars or like people on bikes at a time. I'm a skittish puppy. So, you know, just ask around, find routes that are like, I think, you know, the best routes are one that are like more like the less times you're going to have to stop, the better. I like back roads. I like county roads when those are available. But, you know, just ask around. I think Map My Run, which is an app by Under Armour, is a really fun, great resource for people that are looking for new routes. I also think like you don't have to have like a super perfect, awesome, cool baller Strava art route every time you run. I had an athlete who was out of town this week and she just ran back and forth on a 2-mile stretch of road that didn't have cars or ice on it. Do what you got to do, you know, like listen to cooking podcasts and just like run back and forth. That still counts. That could even be more entertaining than a treadmill, but do what you got to do to stay consistent, even if that means skipping a run here and there, to, you know, just make stuff happen when a lot is going on the holidays. And yeah, that's kind of all I had on that. I mean, if anyone's flying, which like, have fun. I always like to pack my like running stuff as my carry-on, so it's separate. So I know like, even if like I never see the rest of my luggage again, I can definitely still like get a run in right away. Yeah, that's kind of all my advice for travel, is just like prioritize consistency when you can, and then be kind to yourself when it doesn't happen, because being a person is hard. The holidays are hard. It's 2020, but people on the team are already getting vaccinated, which is amazing. So shout out to all of our amazing frontline healthcare workers, essential workers, parents, teachers, everyone working so hard during the pandemic to just keep the rest of us like to have some semblance of civilization out there. We appreciate you guys. Yeah, I think that's all I had for today. I've consumed a carafe of coffee, 1 metric carafe. But yeah, so I hope everyone goes and enjoys their weekend long run. Remember that mental and physical health and safety are always the priority. And yeah,
That one was David Goggins.
yeah.
Nobody
I mean,
likes David Goggins.
just like, I hope that he finds peace with himself. I would not want to live in his brain. I've worked very hard to create a livable brain for myself, and I hope that he can someday commit to the same hard work without diminishing it in other people.
Yeah. Okay, great. Have a good weekend, guys.
Yeah, have a great weekend. You are amazing.